What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. I got a really interesting comment from one of you guys under this video right here, how to use Anki for language learning. Here is the comment. Unrelated to language learning, but there is a channel called 10,000 Hours. In some of his first videos, he shows how he uses Anki to learn drawing. I thought it was interesting because I always thought Anki should be used for declarative knowledge rather than something procedural like drawing or painting. Now that definitely caught my attention, so we're going to jump over to this guy's video right now and we're actually going to see how you can use it in like art. Now, you might be thinking, what, this has no relationship to language learning. Why are we doing this? Well, I'm not a language learning channel. Yes, I talk about languages and everything on this channel, like a lot at the moment, but realistically, I'm kind of like a self-improvement challenges type of guy channel. So, and I guess React content, and actually, I'm just a fucking everything guy. I'm just Evildea. Okay, let's watch this.
Time for another video, and before we get started, a big thank you and shout out once again to everyone who's liked and subscribed so far. I've had some really nice conversations with some of you, and I feel like I'm learning a lot from you guys, so hopefully you continue to find my videos helpful. I'd like this to become a place where we can all help each other grow and share what we're learning. If you are new here, welcome. I'm trying to improve my painting and drawing skills across a 10,000 hour time frame, but make my improvement as fast and efficient as possible by using techniques from the world of meta-learning, neuroscience, and autodidacticism. If you've been following along so far with my previous videos, you know what sort of very abstract, generic things we need to train to improve our art in general, the skills that are required to draw anything, which we call the skill pillars. I've worked out my current artistic limitations based on these pillars and set them as my goals. Today we'll look at one possible way to begin training those skill pillars efficiently by leveraging some of the developments made in the field of neuroscience. This video represents the first art learning experiment for this channel, and it will be ongoing. I'm currently using this method experimentally to manage my daily training, which I post as shorts here on YouTube. Let me start this by saying that
I should totally do an art challenge at some point. I was actually pretty good at art when I was younger, but I have not done anything like hand-drawn and freaking for years, okay? Like, must be like 15 plus years at this point. But he was talking about like the skill pillars there. Like this stuff we could easily, refer to in languages. Like, what are the main things you need to focus on? Your listening, your speaking, your reading, possibly your writing, these types of skill sets, okay? And then figuring out where your weaknesses within those are. So like, for example, at the moment, my greatest weakness with Mandarin Chinese is one that I still often structure sentences in ways that are they can be quite unnatural. And then I would say my second biggest weakness is the fact that there is still a lot of vocab that I still passively can't understand. So I need to do a lot more listening still and a lot more practice in the speaking department. But funnily enough, my reading has managed to outpace, I guess, my speaking in a lot of ways, which was kind of unexpected. I feel like I've kind of reached that point where I'm getting a waterfall effect happening.
I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a keen neuroscience and meta-learning enthusiast, but I'm very much at the end of the line where I take the things that scientists believe to be true and try to apply them to learning art.
Okay, so the type of person I am is an experimenter. Yes, I like to, read about the science and what science says and all this, but at the same time, just because it says something, in some article or something, doesn't mean it's necessarily true for you on an individual level, because like they're usually dealing with large population groups and stuff. So I like to experiment with things, which obviously means I waste a lot of time and I could just believe, what others say. But that's why I like to go through these things. And I've found always that via experimentation, it allows me to become an expert in the subject matter anyway.
I run these experiments in the true scientific sense as such, but I do try to be as thorough as possible and record what things I notice about myself as I apply them.
It's exactly the same. Like I've got my series on this channel where I am every 50 hours dropping updates on my Chinese, my Spanish progression, and then future challenges that will be coming.
Sharing these things with you, I can compare my experience with yours, and then we can hopefully see where certain approaches might be helpful to others. So please bear those points in mind, and if you are watching this as a scientist or teacher or as a professional artist, please feel free to comment and point out any improvements I can make. Like I say, I'm here to learn and all input is welcome. To start, I want to preload your minds with some of the concepts that we will be covering today. We will be looking at declarative knowledge, which relates to learning facts, ordered lists, and other pieces of information. You can think of this as theoretical knowledge. Procedural knowledge, which relates to more creative and abstract things like music or art. You can think of this as practical skill or ability. Spaced repetition, which is an evidence-based learning technique that we'll be looking closely at.
That's what I'm most curious about, spaced repetition. Now I'm going to go jump down here and see if he deals with... Okay, he straight up goes into spaced repetition straight from here by the looks of it. So we'll just start from this point right here. If you guys want to watch the full video, there will be a link down in the description, like always.
It's a very simple concept. Let's say we want to learn the Japanese word for frog, which is kaeru. If you didn't already know that, and I asked you what it is in 5 minutes' time, you'll probably remember it.
So you can tell this guy's from a language background. That's probably where he got the idea to use Anki. It's like I got the idea of using Anki and programming from my language background as well, which is why I think learning languages is an excellent skill set, because it's something that bleeds over into everything else quite nicely.
But if I ask you tomorrow morning, well, maybe you have a good memory, but most people will find that it started to deteriorate. You might know it began with a K, but no, can't recall it. It was sitting in your short-term memory, and you never used it, so your brain just threw it away. Spaced repetition simply means that we review the information in our short-term memory, which refreshes it, and repeat this at longer and longer intervals until it gets placed in our long-term memory. Then, in 6 months' time, when I ask you what frog is in Japanese, boom, kaeru. You might have experienced this yourself through things like flashcards and found that although it worked, you eventually stopped using the cards and the knowledge faded. What you need is a way to somehow automate this process, like a spaced repetition scheduler of sorts, that tells us when to grab those cards and review them. The good news is, many actually exist.
I got a question for everyone down in the comment section. Let me know, what is the most random way you have found yourself using flashcards or spaced repetition? Because I did see some pretty awesome comments on my previous video, but I'm always curious to know. Like, a lot of you guys were shocked that I used it to memorize like dates of important, events in my life and stuff.
The one I use is called Anki, and I'm not affiliated with it in any way, but I do recommend it. It's open source and free, but for some reason not on Apple products, so you might have to find an alternative like Memrise if you use iOS. People use Anki and other apps like it to manage their flashcards so they can
So this video is clearly a little bit old, because it is actually now available on iOS.
essentially never forget the things they want to learn. It works great for situations like kaeru, but could it work for art? The problem, as we've seen, is that most of these spaced repetition products and techniques exist for declarative, theory-based things, and as we've seen, getting good at art is really more a case of procedural knowledge, or doing it. So I began, as far as I know, the never-before-attempted task of trying to learn painting and drawing via spaced repetition.
This sounds insane. I'm really curious to see how this goes.
The things you've seen me produce so far in all of my videos are all footage of me using Anki to learn art this way. It's how I've gotten to the level I have, but it's taken me about 3 years. But I really think it's helped me to experience a large and unquestionably obvious increase in my skill compared to what I'd accomplished previously. So let me share with you what my Anki decks look like. Anki decks consist of flashcards that you make yourself or download.
Okay, so what do we got? We've got anatomy just there, Photoshop skills. Okay, so that's like technical skills. I can get that. It's like a bunch of different like application programs he's got going here. Okay, I wonder if there's anything actual for like drawing concepts.
And these are all cards I've made myself. I've been at this for a few years now, since about 2020, playing with how I format the cards and gradually refining them so they make sense to the way my brain works.
See, that's the thing with Anki. I made my video on how to use Anki and people are like, oh, that's very different to how I use it. My use of Anki has itself changed massively over the years as I've iterated on it and found like that certain things work well for me and certain things don't work well for me. So this is why you guys need to experiment and find what works, and don't just necessarily go, oh, some YouTuber said I've got to do this, I've got to do this.
Through most of the courses on Schoolism, a whole bunch on Udemy and Domestika and Learn Squared, as well as a lot of Gumroad content for the artists I showcase during these videos. I've also made cards from YouTube channels I admire, the Ross Draws art course and Sam Does Art's Patreon videos, and more recently a bunch of books on painting and drawing which are the most recommended in their respective fields. Of all of these resources, the books have actually proved the most useful, and I believe there is a reason for this, but I'm going to save it for a future video as it would mean sidetracking. As an example, let's look at the book How to Draw by Scott Robertson. In my opinion, this is the best book I've found to date on learning to draw in the most generic sense. This book lays out in a clear and logical pathway, quite literally, how to draw, starting at drawing lines freehand and taking you right the way up to very complex vehicles. All I have to do is turn each key concept, which is usually a single page in the book, into an Anki card. I do this by working from a Kindle version of the book and screen capturing the pages. If no ebooks available, I buy a hard copy and actually use a book scanner to scan the book in so that I can make cards from it. Yes, I know that's nuts and a lot of effort, but that's how deeply I believe in testing these methods out. I see it as putting the work in up front and then benefiting from being able to use the book here in Anki for the rest of my day studying art, so it's worth the initial headache for me. The scanned page turned into a card looks like this. The front has the card title, which is all.
So we've got... Okay, I should let him speak, but I'm always worried that they're going to jump ahead. I'll let him speak first.
Also usually what I'll be isolating for study. The back has the scanned or screen grabbed pages. To capture an entire book like this takes about an evening or two. From there, I have to work through the book, reading each card and prepping it. Let's take something like this card from the book Landscape Painting by Mitchell Abala as an example. It talks about simplification and massing, the key idea, so I read the card and write questions on the front of the card that directly relate to these key ideas. This is that declarative learning thing I was talking about earlier. Some art knowledge is declarative, like what the cone of vision is for a human being. It's 60 degrees, by the way.
Yeah, so I did that also in programming. An example is pi, 3.1415926653. Like, I just memorized that number using Anki at some point. I've never forgotten it. I don't even have the card for that anymore, but I still know it. But there's like a bunch of different formulas, related to how to, like, different types of matrices and all sorts of stuff, where just like random knowledge that you don't necessarily need to know, but by knowing it, it helps you in many other ways, okay? Especially for me, when I went deep into like programming 3D engines at one point, and I didn't want to use anyone's library, so I was programming everything from the base up, just so I could understand how it all fit together. And that's where I needed to know all of those things.
Or how many value steps are in the Moncel color chart, which is 10. And these prompts are designed to help me memorize the stuff I personally believe is important to me. Next up, I write a challenge for each card that contains the key idea. This is the key component I was missing when I started doing this originally. Each page of the book represents a key idea, and so now this card has isolated and captured that key idea. I have a declarative and procedural aspect to each card. We need to immediately apply this small isolated art concept in a way that means we can train it like a sports drill. That's how we actually make ourselves able to do it, which is the procedural part of learning art. Challenge with this card is to create a value study of a scene from life or reference using up to 10 values and trying to keep it to as few as possible.
Okay, I see what he's doing. He's basically using the cards as an exercise that he needs to complete daily. So obviously that's going to take time, but as an artist, you probably want to re-practice lots of concepts over and over anyway. So this is allowing him to re-go over those concepts.
Focuses on trying to group small and medium detailed areas into singular big shapes for as much of the image as possible. I use the back of the card to write notes which represent my current thoughts on this small isolated art concept so that I can read what I was thinking about last time I saw it and track my learning.
That's actually a really cool idea, using the back of the card to store your personal thoughts on how you're going. I'm going to think about if there's a way to integrate that into the flow of languages. Because maybe what we could do is we could have on the front of the card, give a speech about a topic. There you go, guys. Front of the card is a topic. You give a speech. You try give the speech. You then, I don't know, you record it, you take notes on where you screwed up, the mistakes you made, and then you take those notes onto the back of the card. Then next time the card comes around, you give the speech, you see how you're going, whether you're actually adjusting to that, or whether there's certain things you need to focus on. Interesting.
I also find that as I learn different things, I can relate knowledge in a cross-referencing manner, and this sometimes changes the way I actually understand a card, so I can track those changes over time here as well. Preparing a deck like this can take a little while, so I do it gradually. The hardest bit is just working out what challenges to use for each card, because some are not that obvious. Once we prepare a deck like this, we can begin what I call circulation, which is where we actually study a card. I do this based on what I need to learn. My current focus, based on my goals, is on learning about colour theory and painting with gouache, so I can find cards that relate directly to that and bring them into circulation. So to show you what that looks like, you should join me for my training today. If you watch my video on baselining, then you know I'm not very good at painting really. I don't understand how colour works, I have very limited experience with both digital and traditional tools, and so most of the cards I'm circulating at the moment relate to improving at these things. This card comes from the book Rediscovering Gouache by Alosha Blau, and the thing it isolates is painting with gouache in glazes, and specifically building an image up by starting with the lightest parts and progressively getting darker. You can see I have a few declarative parts at the top just to kickstart my brain a little, the difference between a glaze and a wash, what it is in his eyes at least, which is just a matter of timing.
Yeah, so I did a similar thing to this when I was learning network stacks. And I was like, okay, what's the difference between UDP and TCP? So that's User Datagram Protocol and Transport Control Protocol. So these are like two different ways of sending data over the interwebs. And like, you know, most people work in, let's say, system administration. They have a basic idea about it. You know, one's got a handshake involved, the other one doesn't. But realistically, I went down to the fundamentals of, you know, why it's the way it is and what's the problems it's trying to solve. And now, you know, when it comes to programming side of things, I can select which one I want to use, or I could use like, I could develop a TCP model inside UDP so that certain things are, you know, handshaked and certain things are not, and that holds up traffic and all sorts of stuff. I know I'm going deep into the programming route, but what I'm just trying to stress here is that this is a great way of focusing in on one little thing and making sure you actually understand it. Because if you can create the cards and then write the answers yourself, and you know those answers are correct, it means you understand it. And then when you're doing your reviews come, you know, day in, the next day, you ensure that you don't lose that little bit of knowledge. Like all those things, that random points that I picked up over time that are rarely needed, but then at certain instances in my career are needed a lot, it's good that I don't have to go back and re-study that. I should totally do a challenge where I learn something like Godot by using, you know, Anki and stuff. I don't know, like just something like that.
Gouache is usually painted wet on wet, but a glaze is when you let the current layer dry completely, then go on top with the next layer. The danger with gouache is that doing this can reactivate the previous layer and lead to the layers blending into a mess, so some care is required. The final question is actually a bit of a trick one, because you can work from both light to dark and dark to light, but it depends on the paint opacity and the consistency you're using, so you'd most likely plan ahead and find the best approach based on what you are drawing. And now for the procedural part, the challenge, and it's quite simple: paint a small study using this glazing method. I use his series of images on the card as a guide to how the paint should look, and also try to stick to a similar subject matter to make the comparisons easier, which is why you may have seen me painting dogs recently. On the reverse of the card is the excerpt from the book, so I can reread it and refresh myself. I tried refreshing before the studies, during and after, and I tend to find that doing it before returns the best results, giving me a clear and defined idea of what I need to do right now so I can...
One thing I like to do with Anki and languages is I like to review my Anki before I do all the input. That way, like, my brain is completely fresh with all the words that I've reviewed, and then I go do, you know, my several hours of input.
Apply it immediately to the current challenge. Over time, different parts of the text jump out at you, or a certain sentence takes on a new meaning where your understanding of things has evolved, which is why rereading the text is so important. You rarely understand what the author truly means until you have some mileage under your belt. I find a good reference on Pinterest and sketch it out without spending too much time on it. Sketching and accurate proportions are not the main focus here, so yeah, I try my best, but I don't really mind if it's slightly off. I've been drawing long enough that I don't find this too difficult, so unless I'm having a bad day, the drawing will be decent enough that I can get somewhere without having to spend an hour making everything perfect. I'm going to do 2 studies for this card today, each one 30 minutes or so, but the biggest setback when doing this is the drying time, because I need each layer to be dry for it to truly see how it works, so I might need to invest in a hairdryer or something to speed that up. That means today's training may take longer than 1 hour. On the back of the card, you can see the notes I've made for it, which give me some further instruction about what I've been trying, what things I've been working, what things I should avoid. Because
I'm definitely going to give this a try with, like, speech ideas, mini monologue ideas with languages, and then collect my notes on the back of the card. I think that could be fascinating for an experiment. Anyway, this video is... it's going to be quite a long one, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the link down in the description below. I think I kind of got some interesting points from this. If you want to explore it, again, go click on his video, give him a sub, all that type of stuff. And if there's anything else out there you think is interesting, I love these like little random ones, just let me know down in the comment section below, and I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, I will find you and paint your absolute demise at my hands with a rusted butter knife.